Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast. I'm Hilton. He's Matt Pippin, Auletta. And yes, we are back. The three-time UFA champion New York Empire. They look a little different, but don't worry. Your favorite UFA podcast. Well, at least, Matt, I feel like we're top three, right? We have to be top three somewhere.
How many are there?
So I feel like we have to be top three. I don't know. But we are back this season for another one. And we're talking preseason because we kind of blinked. And Matt, we are going to be too far along into the season before we got started. So Empire will have media day once this is published. So this is being recorded right before media day. I can't imagine anything crazy is going to be changing between now and when this is published. But I guess the first thing I have to do before I say anything else is I looked at the roster, and I also played Winter League with you, and a comeback hasn't come up. I feel like you come back to the podcast, yes, the comeback, but there's no playing comeback, I feel like.
No, I regrew a mustache.
Yeah,
For those who are just listening, that was a surprise to me. It just kind of started happening over time, and then the kids were kind of into it, so I just kind of let it roll for a bit. So the mustache is back. You will not see me on a UFA field as a competitor. Maybe hanging out on the sidelines, a little reporting, little spectating, some alumni day nonsense. But no, not going to play anytime soon. I think I would get absolutely trashed by people who are actually in good shape currently.
Well, I cannot confirm that. I have no inside information, but I'm maybe the Stevens might have retired your number just to make sure that retired players, once your number's up there, I don't know if you feel like you need to be back on the field for any reason. So I don't know. Maybe they were trying to send a message as well. But anyway, I guess we don't really have much to say about last season that we haven't already said, other than the fact that the team that lost 19-18 to the Boston Glory, the buzzer beater in the East Division semis, the team that went 8-4, that wound up getting wins over the bottom of the division, also had some good marquee wins on the road as well. The one against Minnesota winds up looking a lot better when the season ended, that they went on that road trip and got that victory over the eventual UFA champions. But I do want to go back to that team because you're talking about a team that 60% of it doesn't actually remember that game. Well, they do. They watched it, but they weren't necessarily a part of it. The losses to talk about here: Charles Weinberg, Ethan Fortin, Elliot Chartok, Jeff Holm. I'm not doing it in one breath. Mike Drost, Ryan Drost, Angelo Olchese, Jose Aloro, Robert Elliston, Breton Tan, Connor Russell, and Matthias Ling. I just named players that played at least 4 games. So I didn't name all the players that are turned over from the roster. I just named the players that I would say were quote unquote core to what the Empire were doing because they played more than 4 games last season. And that is a big list. So when I read that list out to you, of course, Mike and Ryan, you can start by discussing them. I mean, obviously losing the first and second all-time UFA block leaders, that is a big deal. That's a big news thing. That's something to talk about, yes. But in terms of the names that I mentioned, what kind of jumps out to you and says, oh, Empire is going to have that player back this season? That's something to note.
Also just real quick, I mean, we're not even mentioning from 2 seasons ago. I know they played an okay season last year. You're also missing Babbitt, Lithio, Katz, Osgar. Yeah, the list goes on, and most teams, if they could snap their fingers and have everyone who played on the Empire who's gone the last 2 years and replace like half of their team, I think every team in the league takes that deal, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2. I mean, it's just the depth and the quality is astounding. And Empire still has some top end players. They're still going to be good and they're going to compete game to game. But one of the things that really set the team apart the last few years was, sure, top end players, absolute superstars, but players like 9 through 23 on the roster were definitely better than players 9 through 23 on every other team. And I wouldn't even know who would be second place in that race. So just the amount of depth that is gone is staggering.
Yeah, I mean, I think 4 of the names that really jump out to me, as I said, other than Mike and Ryan, who I think you and I think even around the league last season, they got their flowers. I really do think the Dross were getting their flowers, and it's not to discredit who they were in 2024, but they were taking a lesser role that they had obviously in previous seasons. But I mean, even in the third championship, that championship weekend, Ryan was fantastic that weekend. So it's not that their impact, but as far as to your point, game in and game out, what to expect of certain players. Like Brenton Tan, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 blocks. Not a big number at all. But Brenton Tan was one of the most undervalued players, I think, in the entire league defensively. He shut down, talking about Salt Lake, he shut down Grant Lindsley in ways that we go back to. And I say, I have been watching Grant Lindsley for more than a decade, and he is on a short list of players that gave him trouble in ways that others didn't. Elliot Chartok, if you're putting up those kind of offensive numbers, you're being called a star in the league. But because of the other players around him, he wasn't called a star. But the throwing yards, the consistency, phenomenal. And then Ethan Fort, the same thing on the D-line. And the fact that he was available to be this other O-line handler. And then, of course, Charles Weinberg, who you and I argued was probably the team MVP last season, just because against the UFA defenses and every yard being a fight, Charles really did help the Empire grind for every yard. Because there are the big plays, there are hucks, there are big moments, highlights, whatever, right? But there's also like 35 other minutes of the game where you just have to get yards any way possible. And Charles, even his counting stats, 15 goals, 30 assists, and 3 blocks. Again, it doesn't necessarily jump off the page as like a superstar stat. Like he wasn't in consideration for one of the all UFA teams. But again, we watch the games and we just know how important he was to the Empire.
A lot of the people you've mentioned were glue guys who did just all the things that hold a really, really good team together. Charles, did a lot of work that unsung. I mean, sometimes it looked flashy, sometimes it looked nice, but he did a ton of great work. Ethan, same thing. He's out there covering tough matchups, moving the disc on defense, sometimes switching over to offense. Game to game, Ethan was in a different role like half the season, and 90% of the time he excelled. Then Josue Aloro didn't play a ton of games last year, but when they played, typically had one of the hardest matchups on the field. So I don't even know how many blocks Josue got last year. I'd have to look it up, but I don't think it was that many. Yeah, exactly. But
they had no goals, 2 assists, 1 block. But again, we watched the game.
How much harder so many teams had to work because of all that defensive pressure from Josue, the Drosts, Ethan. I mean, it's hard to replicate that. I'm sure the team has loaded up with new athletic players. Some of the players who didn't play as much last year will play more, and I'm sure they're going to be fine. But when you're talking about championship expectations, which is something that now, a few years in from the first championship Empire has every season, it's a whole different ballgame. It's not, hey, yeah, we're going to be good. We'll compete in the playoffs. Like maybe we'll get to championship weekend. It's completely different now when the goalposts have moved of where this organization wants to be. And it's going to be a really tough challenge to see how it all comes together.
Empire fans, it's that time of year again. The UFA season is here, and New York is offering season ticket packages at watchufa.com/empire. Packages include your general admission pass with merch perks and free unlimited popcorn, a disc, and a family pack so you can bring the whole household. Not to mention all season ticket passes include admission to all our away games as well. Just show your pass at the front gate.
Well, that's what our job is. We're talking about the new additions right now. So we're pivoting to this season, and the big names to mention, and when I say big names, we're actually going to mention all names now. Gavin May recovering from ACL injury, so we're not sure how much we're going to see of the Oakland Spider. That's a big body that the Empire could definitely use. I mean, what I will say is having gone to tryouts and having seen them in Philadelphia, and we'll talk about that in a second, the Empire just looked bigger than they did last year. That is one thing, that they just look bigger overall. And this is also without Gavin May, who stands like 6'5" or something, whatever he is. Max Shepard, that I think we're going to call him the marquee big name move from Pittsburgh. 101 games, 279 goals, 310 assists, 69 blocks, 87% completion percentage, over 6,700 yards since 2021. The last time that he played 8 games in a season, or at least I said less than 8 games, was 2017 when he played just 6. So he shows up and he plays games. The 2019 All-Star MVP. Max Shepard is a star. Just because he played for Pittsburgh, I think, to me, it's a real question on, and I always do compare this a little bit to basketball, where you have a player that, especially when you do like Rookie of the Year voting, right? A rookie that plays on a championship team, the stats may not necessarily be there, but hey, that guy had an important role in an important team and was a good team. And for Max Shepard, he kind of was on this, big stats on a non-playoff team kind of player. And now he is going to have the best players in the UFA that he's been surrounded with, top level talent, around him. And yeah, I think he's the first name I circle. But it's so funny because John Randolph said this week the name that he's most excited about, and maybe this is just because they are closer in age and contemporaries, Calvin Brown is the player that John Randolph is most excited about, the former LA Aviator, last played in 2023 for them. And his numbers in the UFA don't necessarily jump off the page. 18 total games played, 22 goals, 48 assists, 19 blocks, 85% passing completion. But again, you also don't really worry about that because the eye test with Calvin Brown tells you what you need to know. He's a big body, defensively played here in New York for Pony last year on that D-line with a bunch of those players, including Marquez Brownlee, that he'll likely be shepherding the D-line, maybe the first D-line, but also he could jump over to O-line as well. He played O-line for the Aviators in 2019. We saw what he did for Cal Poly Slow in college nationals. So the versatility of Calvin Brown, I would call that player a star. And then we add Ever Shapiro to this, also an LA Aviator from 22 to 24, has actively moved to New York, came to New York to play for the Empire, wanted that challenge, wanted to be a member of the Empire. 80 goals for him in 32 games played, 40 assists, 27 blocks, a plus 97 in his career. Again, another big body here. Dmitry Suvorov, don't underrate Suvorov's move. Comes from Philly as their leading goal scorer last season. 26 goals for him last year, 7 assists, 1 block, a plus 27, a 98% completion percentage, and very much, I'll say this very quickly. Suvorov, if you want to talk about a Charles Weinberg replacement, he's a little bit shorter than Charles. He doesn't have the same, we'll say, ability to stretch the field, but he is so fast. So you can still put those up to him, and he's going to create that separation. He's one of the better players in the entire East Division in getting open, and I think Empire fans are going to see that this year. And then Oliver Fay, I'd say he's probably the last, we'll say, big addition for the Empire this year. Played for Austin 22 to 24 in 34 games played, 23 goals, 21 assists, but most importantly, 27 blocks in 34 games played with a 93% passing completion. Oliver Fay is a name that I don't think many fans talk about outside of the South. But again, this is a new face in a new division, and I think you're going to be talking about him quite a bit because of the names that I mentioned, Jeff Holm, Connor Russell. Oliver Fay, to me, is a very not only similar player, does a little less handling than Jeff Holm did, but very similar defensive assignments. They're going to wind up having the players that, again, Holm and Russell would take on. That is going to be Oliver Fay's likely defensive assignments. And yeah, just another big body, and we got to see that against Philadelphia as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to say Fay to Holm was a comparison that maybe would kind of pan out because Holm sometimes played offense, sometimes played defense, big boy. So I think you might be spot on with that one. For Max Shepard, I'm excited to watch him play surrounded by good players. I know he was the All-Star Game MVP way back when, but when everyone is like world class, then it's pretty easy to play amongst everybody and look good with them. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a transition period where maybe there'll be a few too many turnovers here and there. Just that's like kind of been his play style in Pittsburgh. And, sometimes when you're one of the better players on the team, you kind of have to drive the offense and try and make things happen. And you could get a little loose with the disc and that could happen. So as long as that comes up a little bit, if he's playing offense for the Empire, then I think he'll be fine. He'll slot in and it'll probably be a great addition. And just watching him play more meaningful Ultimate, I think will be exciting for the fans.
Yeah, let's also mention the UFA debuts against Philadelphia in the preseason for Drew Snoddigal, Benjamin Simmons, a UNC Charlotte product, Tyler Mackey from Rutgers, and then 2 Montclair High School players in Samuel McCrory and Kalba Nicham Luta. What I will say, having watched that Philadelphia preseason game even, that was the youngest Empire that I've seen in a long, long, long time. And I'm talking going back to, I think, 2013, 14, 15. It was a young Empire team. But even when y'all were getting started, yes, you were young professionals, but I wouldn't say that they were as baby-faced players as they were even all those years ago. Again, because at that point, Ryan and Mike, when they showed up in, 10, 11 years ago, even you guys were still in your mid-20s at that point. It wasn't like you were high school kid. Well, right, but I'm saying like
Yeah.
Mike and Ryan, who are a few years younger than you, but it was a young team, yes, but the likes of Matt Lamar and the Dross and some of those other faces. I mean, again, Taylor Brooks was not a spring chicken when that was all getting started. Hassan Carnegie, of course, not super young. Izzy Bryant, not super young, and that was the original core. But yeah, to see two high schoolers on the Empire is just, I was taken aback a little bit. But I definitely enjoyed in Philadelphia that 2018 win for the Empire. Whether it was, and I think Ever Shapiro, while he is in his mid-20s, there is a youthful exuberance. There is a joy that he plays with. And it was interesting to watch that. There was a bookend by Sam McCourty, one of the high scorers, and it's the bookend, and then you just see it. You just see this high school player, and it's just like he doesn't. That's a fun thing about young players like that. I think again, Ever Shapiro, this is 4th year as a pro, but it's like young players don't know how good they are, and that's a great thing to do. And I mean, I think they have to compete a little bit. They have some idea, but there's this exuberance that they don't know. And if you can limit their turnovers and limit the mistakes, it's all fun when they're young players.
It's interesting because if they've been playing for 4 years of high school, especially on some of like the regional, like really good teams, they're basically on par with people who picked up the game in college. I mean, there's not that much of a difference so far. And if they played even before that, if they got to middle school ultimate, especially in good areas with good programs, I mean, sometimes they have more experience than people who are older than that by a few years. It really just depends. So yeah, that's just like an interesting wrinkle that as time goes on, I'm sure more and more people will play, middle school, high school, and it won't be a thing anymore. And we'll have much more finished products coming into the league earlier, like right out of high school. But yeah, for now, it's super interesting to see when young kid comes out, and it's always great to see, get a block, get a goal, super excited.
Well, I think you're definitely right about that. I mean, both McCory and Nietzsche Luda on Devil, which is the youth program in the New Jersey, Delaware County area, they, with the U17 Devil program, they travel. Like they go to other places for the high school nationals. And so they do more traveling than, again, like you and I did when we were playing in college. Like we got in cars and we're basically on the Northeast. But like, our college program wasn't going to nationals, right?
I played in some pretty bad tournaments, bad tournaments.
Exactly. And so as high schoolers, they're like going out. I'm misremembering where they went, but whether it's in Colorado or South Carolina or Minnesota, wherever wherever it may be, yeah, they're traveling to play Ultimate. Which again, the Empire did this last weekend against Philly in the preseason game. So let's talk some experimental rules as well. We did get to see. All right, let me have fun first before you.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? I'll play along. I'll smile.
Yeah. Having called the game, again, speaking of joy and exuberance, when I saw the first triple team in UFA history and being on the call and getting to call the first triple team in UFA history, so much fun. The problem with it is that they didn't go close enough to the sideline, so it was easily stepped around. And it became, if my math is right, you had one player behind the disc and 3 players then stuck behind the disc. So yes, it became a 6v4, which certainly was advantageous for the Empire offense at that point to take over. So yeah, the first triple team in history did not work as well as the second one did. But even then, so I don't know about the triple team. The 6-second stall, I will say, it didn't bother me. Like it didn't really affect too much of anything. I think to a point that shout out to the old Philly commentator and Dusty Rhodes made years ago, the level and skill was getting better to the point where 6 seconds down from 7 is not that crazy. Like everybody can throw at just such a better level than they did 10 years ago. So losing that extra second, it doesn't really feel like we're changing the game that much. But then I will give you the runway here because the timeout allows you to pull from midfield. So taking a timeout allows you to pull from midfield. It took me back. I got nostalgic for the MLU days, but you're saying leave that rule with the MLU is what I'm hearing.
The MLU is dead. Long live AUDL, UFA. I went to an MLU game in, I guess, 2013 just to watch. I knew some people playing. It was before I decided if I wanted to join the MLU or the AUDL at the time. That pull from half field is awful. It is an awful use of a timeout. It's gimmicky. It's hokey. It's horrible. Team calls a timeout. They pull from half field. Marquez, credit to him, great pulls. He threw these bladey pulls. They landed pretty close to the back of the end zone. Nobody wanted to catch them because they're dangerous. and then you just kind of let it roll out, and then you're pinned on the back. Okay, I get it. In theory, it gives the team who's down the opportunity to maybe get a free gimmicky block, goal back, Callahan, something. Okay.
Well, we didn't get to see the Callahan rule because there was
we didn't. Yeah.
Callahan rule. You also get the disc back. But
right. But
yeah.
So we didn't see it. Empire almost got a Callahan on one of them. I think it was a layout block, whatever. They got another block. They scored, I think, on both of those. But when I watched it in the MLU, one of the things that happened was one team uses that rule. They get the blocks. They score. The other team then does it in kind. They do it back. Same thing. And I sat through what felt like 8 minutes of just awful ultimate, watching people pull from half field, trap the other team in like the back corner, and then nobody plays real ultimate. And you're sitting there as time goes away, and it's just awful. It's so awful. Anyone who is important that is listening, more important than you and I, please never. Experimental, I get it. You thought maybe. No, it's awful. I hate it so much. I hate that rule more than I hate the Toronto Rush. You can put that on the record. Okay? It's awful. It's so bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
Listen, and Mark Lord returned to the Toronto Rush this year. I mean, it means that Toronto Rush is going to look a little bit like the one that you hated.
Yeah, no, he was a cool, nice guy. He's fine. Mark, you're okay in my book. The team as a whole, the entity. Yeah. No, the rule is awful.
I'm saying that the Toronto Rush with him back, they look similar. They look a little more closer than they have to what we're used to or you're used to than they have in most recent seasons.
I want them to be good, the Rush, to be good enough where the games, they think they have a chance. And then the Empire come in and they just stomp them. And then they Rush think, oh, man, we really thought we had that. And then they don't. That's what I want forever.
Well, Philly might have thought they did have a chance in this preseason game because New York did not have Jack Williams is out injured, but just cautionary at this point. Ben Yott unavailable, John Randolph unavailable, Calvin Brown unavailable, Antoine Davis unavailable. So I think you make a little bit of an argument for the Empire. What did we learn? I'm not really too sure because, I think all players are important. The units are important. But if you and I are just talking as analysts here, the Empire were arguably missing, 5 of their top 7 players, 5 of their top 8 players. And so it's hard to glean too much from that. For Philly, they had a new face on the sideline. Again, shouts to David Brandoff, who you and I both know. And I think there was something that felt refreshing about Philadelphia. But, we know that they're going to have an uphill battle this season. But I also think the Empire were ready to play. They didn't take that one lightly. And we did see some guys like Sam Jonas. We know that he could quarterback that second D-line last year. He played the most points of anybody in the game because the Empire did get a few blocks and things. But yeah, I think there were things definitely to take from it, but I don't know how much we take from the O-line, which was Suvorov, Wershmeyer, Bailey, Shepard, Chartok, Toe, Shapiro, and Labar. With the exception of, here's what I'll say, of the 2 names that I just read on that O-line, the 2 I want to highlight here is Wershmeyer, Bailey, and Labar. Because with Elliott Chartok gone, Saul is likely going to take on a bigger role, like a different role handling. And we did see him be kind of the QB1 in a way that we haven't really seen before. And Oliver Chartok would come back into the backfield to help him quite a bit. And Max Shepard would come deep to the disc, and he was letting it fly. That was fun. It was nice to see Nori Toe back and healthy after last season. So great to see Nori back. Also, congratulations to Nori getting married this week as well. So awesome stuff for Nori. Just a great week, right? Getting to start on the O-line of the Empire, getting married. Awesome stuff for Nori Toe. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. But then Matt Labar also leads the team with 5 goals. And we saw him play some O-line last year. And that could very well continue, him playing O-line or D-line wherever he is needed. Sure,
he's very dynamic, so it could be a good fit. And if they turn it over, he can get a block too. So I don't want to call him Jeff Babbitt light, but similar kind of player profile, like a tiny bit. I don't know. I feel like it could work.
Yeah, I feel like we could probably go around the league and get a little bit better of a comparison.
Yeah.
I'll definitely do my homework on that after week 1 when we go to discuss those games. But yeah, to me, it was interesting because you add all those those faces and new pieces to the O-line, and yet it just felt like it was going to be changes within the players that we already know about. It's interesting too because Jack Williams, where he's going to fit on that O-line is going to be interesting. Like how he's used. Is he used as just a pure handler? Is he used as an 0-1 quarterback? And then Sullivan Wershmeyer Bailey continues to kind of be the reset and does his job? Or is it, that Saul is just kind of the QB1, and then you let Jack cook, and then Max comes back into the Max Shepard comes back into the backfield a bit more. Again, we've seen Oliver Chartok, who is a handler for Exist in the mixed division for club. So Oliver, he profiles himself as a handler. So it's interesting that Oliver has always played downfield. So I think you might see a bit more fluidity around the disc this season than we have in recent seasons for the Empire. And I not say I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least for Ben Yacht, it might be a little bit more what he does for club as opposed to what he does in the UFA. And that is kind of just purely as a finisher. His job is kind of just be downfield and figure this thing out, as opposed to in the UFA. We do see Yacht go sideline to sideline and kind of everybody rotating in and out. But Yacht might just kind of be a finisher this season, which I don't think is too bad for arguably the best finisher in the league.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to just kind of see how it all melds together. They have a lot of good pieces. They can pull, they can move. So yeah, I don't know. I like you said, the preseason game, they were missing so many good players. It's really hard to glean that much from it.
But I will say, though, Shepard also there was an Oscar-esque-ness to the way that he received the disc in the middle of the field and immediately let it fly.
Yeah.
And I think a big key to the season as well is going to be the chemistry between Shepard and then Shapiro and Yacht downfield. I think if Shapiro does wind up playing O-line, because he also played D-line some in that game, and he's a better defender, I think, than he gets credit for. But I think between Shepard and then Yacht, Shapiro, that chemistry and timing, Empire have been practicing already, and if they can get that on lock, I think the Empire are really dangerous with the long ball in a way that they just weren't last season.
Yeah, and it's like a medium long ball, right? If Shepard gets a disc on a nice under, and there's not as many people in the way, and Yacht has free reign of the field. I mean, who can stop him most of the time in all that space with pinpoint throws that are kind of dropping around players? I mean, he can just eat up as much as he wants, and that's one of the things the team was missing a little bit last year. They were missing that like dynamic kind of second piece to deliver the disc in like slightly more dangerous and slightly more unconventional ways, because again, the team was very good. They still had great players, but I don't know. Jack plays like a little bit of a smoother offense where he's not necessarily just like throwing these like knife-like blades kind of all over the place, or just I don't know. Just the way the team flowed was very different. So it'll be interesting to see who handles, who helps back, how do they fill back. I mean, a few seasons ago, Empire were using this offense where like handlers would often just leave each other, and to fill back and help, they were getting Babbitt and Lithio as dump resets. Mm-hmm. So, and from an outsider standpoint, before you see that the first few games, if you told me that's how the offense was going to flow, I'd be like, why would you put those giants who could do whatever they want downfield doing that? But everybody was so worried about getting scored on deep, they would come under, they'd get like a 20, 30-yard swing plus a little bit of a gain, and then there's nobody on them because they were so worried about getting beat deep. And then those guys had all the field to throw, and they're also very good throwers. So, I would have never expected that going into that season. And then it ended up being just like a really big part of their offense, and it worked really well, just the way it all kind of came together. And I mean, that's what's fun about putting these teams together. On paper, sure, everybody's good, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you get three pieces who all kind of want to do the same thing, and then if the coaches don't kind of tweak or it's like, okay, we're good, but like we're not great. So I don't know. Putting the puzzle together, I'm really excited to see what Nunez and Stevens do, and it'll just be interesting to see. I think that's one of my favorite parts, maybe because I played offense mostly. I was always adapting because I played with so many different players. Some years I was the one gunning it downfield. Sometimes I was more of a reset. Sometimes I was just kind of more like Charles Weinberg-esque, where like you just kind of Swiss Army knife a little bit. Every team will find that they find their unique identity, and I think they have good players who are adaptable, and I'm excited to see how it all comes together. And if I could derail us for 1 second.
Sure.
I had a thing about experimental rules. We kind of got sidetracked, but I kind of want to say it, just maybe somebody will hear it. Timeouts for the pull and the blade and the nonsense, obviously I hate. I do think that a reworking of timeouts is potentially needed. The way it works now is teams often get a block and then they use a timeout and they sub out their defense and then the other team subs back on their defense. So you're often just seeing offense versus defense, block happens or a turnover happens, and then they flip and you're seeing offense versus defense. Sometimes teams leave like their best player or two on, like a Yacht will stay, a Jack Williams will stay, that kind of thing. But when that happens, we don't actually get these really awesome matchups in the league where how often do we see Jack Williams play against Rowan McDonald? How often, now that they're on different teams, do we see Yacht play against Babbitt? So I think that when teams use a timeout, they should only be able to sub 3, maybe 4 players. So they can sub half of their team, but it also means that your defensive players can't be atrocious at offense. They have to be out there. And, I know that the timeout situation they were going for was like to kind of help with comebacks, but when both teams can abuse it, it gets a little, it's like, is it really helping? Not really. So I think just letting more of the stars of each team play against each other, like 2 or 3, 4 more points a game, would go a long way in making things really cool and really exciting because, to kind of compare it to American football, the NFL, it's like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning literally never played against each other. And I know the way the sport is set up, it's very different, but like they weren't actually going head to head with each other as human beings on the same field. They were playing offense against the other team's defense and like going back and forth, but they didn't play against each other. So I think putting, only being able to sub out like half the line and leaving some people in and some coming in, I think you'd get a lot of really awesome matchups, like stars against stars, where they're not only playing offense or only playing defense. And that is something I think would be really cool. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily help with the trying to help teams that are down come back into the game a little bit more easily situation. I do think well, yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on that for a second. But the stall 6, I do think is good. I think, everybody's getting better. So what's the difference of a second? When games are frantic and kind of high paced towards the end, or people get a little nervous, the game's really tight, it's a big game, you might get that 1 or 2 more turns a game just because of the pace, they rush, there's a little less time for the perfect throw. And I think that could help with, I think, what the league is trying to avoid with like blowouts that are kind of out of hand. And I think it just keeps the game moving and it's good for viewers. But yeah, I don't know. Thoughts on my timeout rule that doesn't involve hokey pulls?
Well, I think it'll also, I guess, a positive for teams that have better depth, who have better offensive, defensive players, than players that are choosing to play D-line. Like, again, the Empire, they would benefit from that rule because, by and large, in theory, John Randolph is a player that can always stay. Ben Yacht is a player that can always stay. Marquez Brown-Lee is a player that can always stay. So the Empire, I think, do have a number of those faces. So to me, I actually would be curious about other teams around the league who do feel like they have more specialized players who just kind of play on one side of the disc. Because to your point, like I would be interested to see Justin Burnett for Minnesota this season. I'm interested to see what a talent like that. I mean, obviously, I got to see him play a little bit when he won the Callahan, obviously, in college at Emory. But I'd love to see Justin Burnett kind of be forced to play O-line. I know what James Pollard looks like playing O-line for Philadelphia, but for Minnesota, like, what is Justin Burnett going to look like? A player that just isn't required to do that. And I think what I find, and one of the things that we learned from Lucas Ambrose, I think, not to call this like a Lucas Ambrose rule, but he showed you in Seattle, having moved them from the Aviators, that instead of just being a block magnet like he was when he was at the Aviators, he touched the disc a lot on those turnovers Seattle, and Seattle had a way of not calling timeouts. So they actually were kind of the example of this. Like, they didn't call a timeout to throw to change their personnel as much as other teams might have. And so watching Lucas Ambrose be the dynamic offensive player that we kind of know that he could be, I think you would see more of that around the league and that choice. The only thing is, I think the people we would have to ask about this would actually be the players that would be on the field more. Like, I would love to actually hear Jack or Yacht, like the players that of the 4 or whatever that are going to stay on the field. I would love to hear what they think of this rule, as opposed to, no disrespect to, I mean, I guess you would put yourself in this category that you would have been one of those players substituted, right, defensively, or do you feel like you would have been on the field for that? Like, I know that Ryan Osgar played all of, I think, 3 D points one year, so Osgar is a good example of that. Osgar knew he was going to be substituted out regardless. He'd be one of the 3 to be taken out, especially on that O-line. Again, had Lithio and had Babbitt and had Jack. But yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what the stars that would have to be the players that would have to stay on the field would think of this rule.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think good offensive players want to get the disc back. I mean, some of them, sometimes it's hard because the other team has great defenders who might be faster than you, but
Yeah.
it's give or take matchup to matchup. I think most people on offense would want a chance to get it back. I know sometimes in a game when people look tired, it might look like they're not putting out as much effort as like, top defenders, and you could have better defenders on the bench. That's sure. But, also don't give them that get out of jail free card. Don't give them the rest. Let them earn it. And then we really see who's like amazing two-way players and who gets it back more often.
Well, we won't see this stuff in 2025.
No,
but
it's fine. It's fine. But yeah.
What we will see in 2025 is the debut of the Vegas Bighorns. So we have said goodbye to Dallas, but let's just end here with the schedule. Next Thursday, April 24th in Oakland, the Empire meet the Spiders for the first time in franchise history. Then the next day, I believe first time in franchise history. Yeah, I'm not misspeaking there. Right? It has to be because they didn't go championship weekend at the same time. So yeah, it would be the first time in franchise history.
So.
Then this one I can guarantee. The next day, it's Empire versus Vegas Bighorns in the very first game for them in franchise history. I got to meet James actually in Philadelphia. So congratulations to the Vegas Bighorns and the owner James for getting that off the ground. That's awesome. And the Empire, I would say they can't overlook the Spiders game. Like Gavin May can tell them, but that's a different Spiders look as well this season. Leo Gordon will be likely making his UFA debut, and the recent college national champ from Brown will probably be well scouted by fellow Brown alums in JR and SRB, as well as the constant collegiate opponent from Slow in Calvin Brown. But, I think Leo Gordon has potential to be one of the stars of this league. And that Oakland Spiders team, they just look better. It's not UFA names. So again, you click on the roster and you're going to be like, well, yeah, it's their first UFA game. And I get that. But that team, having watched many of them on Revolver in the club situation, they know each other. And I think this is a team, that being Oakland, that have a lot of fresh faces that are ready to play together in the UFA. So that is definitely not a game that you can underestimate on the road. And then Vegas is going to be fun. I don't want to disparage them. They've got some former Tampa players. They've got some names that around the league, as well as Joel Clutton, the old Salt Lake defender, big body. But Vegas, I would say the wins might come, but maybe not against the Empire. I think the Empire are heavy favorites on that one.
They might have a few former Empire players, if I'm not mistaken here.
Jaime Perez, yes.
Yeah, and Stephen Poulos, he played a game in like 2014. It was technically right before I joined the team. I think I joined like the next week. I think I just couldn't make one of the first games. And I tried looking this up. It wasn't coming up, but I'm pretty sure Matt Bode is the coach.
Correct.
Yeah. So, no, Matt Bode, former teammate, 2014. And
more of a Carolina legend than the Empire legend, but
yeah, that's fine. But I think he also won like a poker championship something within the last few years. So kind of like pairing good ultimate player, Vegas poker, going out there to coach on weekends. I feel like it's a great spot for him. So yeah, I hope he succeeds both on the field and in the casinos.
Yeah, well then once the road trip is done, you have to wait all the way for the home opener for May 9th. So you and I are going to talk plenty before that happens. But May 9th against the Montreal Real. And then it's interesting, though, because we just talked. It's Oakland, it's Vegas, it's Montreal. Then it's maybe the biggest test of the entire regular season. It's Empire at Glory at Hormel Stadium on Friday, May 16th. And so circle that one. Not say we're not circling the other ones, but circle that one. That is potentially the biggest game of the season. And it's also interesting, too, and this is kind of what I want you to speak to when it comes to the schedule. 7 of the Empire's first 8 games are on the road. Then they finish with 4 straight at home. As a player, would you have liked that? And for this Empire team that might be a little bit younger, do you like that?
No, I think I want a little bit of mix and match. It's a lot of way to start. I mean, it certainly makes the second half of the season easier, but this also isn't the same team from a few years ago that's just like absolutely stacked top to bottom with amazing players. So, there might be some growing pains or just some like chemistry issues. If it was a team from 2 years ago, I would say it's great. Let them just go out there, do their thing, and then coast through the middle of the season. But it might be a little tough, playing all those away games as you kind of find your new identity. I think I'd want it a little more balanced personally.
Well, they will also be getting some college players back. In Taj Murthy will be joining the team. Ethan Lehman will be joining the team. So they will be adding some new faces, or, well, Murthy did play 2 games last season, but so for the first time in a while too, actually for the first time since, I'm not comparing what Murthy and Lehman will do when they return from college to what Ben Yot did when he arrived after finishing up at Minnesota, but it kind of does harken back to Ben Yot's arrival in 2017 when he finished up the college season and he comes in. I believe the year before that was Babbitt was at UMass, right? Finished up at UMass, then joined the Empire coming over from college. So the Empire have been without that for quite some time. They've been a more experienced team. They haven't relied on getting that injection of energy from the collegiate players. But there's a lot of teams around the league. I mean, Boston will be dealing with that. Again, Carolina, obviously, they deal
Yeah.
with that with any other team in the league. But Colorado as well. We'll seeing that with Tobias Brooks and the like. So yeah, I find it the season is always interesting based on the early schedule to the late schedule, because yes, the early schedule can dictate where you wind up in the playoff picture, but the second half of the season is kind of where you are a complete version of you if you have all these young players. And as we talked about at the beginning, so many of these teams now have just good young players who've been playing for 6 years and they're 21 years old or 20 years old, yet they've been playing for 5-6 years as much as some of the college players. So yeah, yeah, it's a curious schedule to me, but if anything, you're also, hey, if you take care of business out on the road, now you finish up with 4 straight at home,
Yeah.
and both Mount Vernon and Joseph Jefferson Field can be fortresses for you, and that would be a good thing. But that's a lot of work that they have to do early on.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think these teams shake out in the East for this year? Do you think? Yeah, I know. I'll put you on the spot. Do you
Yeah, I
do you
mean,
think do you think Boston is the team to beat the way everything's kind of shaken out?
I do. I think that having the 2-time MVP of the league, again, we know what he did for the Empire. Having Jeff Babbitt in your team and then adding the Rookie of the Year in Toby DeCrane, adding Calvin Stoughton, and keeping the team that you basically had last season. I think they return 18 of their top 20 from last season again, and then they add Stoughton to that as well as DeCrane. So it's like I think that they not are the team to beat in the East. I think they're the team to beat in the league. Honestly, I think as much as Minnesota improved the team that won championship weekend last season, I don't want to disparage what they did championship weekend in any way. With all the wind and everything like that, they earned their title. They deserve it. A title is a title. They
Oh
count the
yeah.
same. It doesn't matter how they happen. You still have to go to championship weekend, take care of business against what looked to be unstoppable offensive juggernauts in DC and Carolina, but they took care of business. They did what they had to do. And, they've added Burnett. They've added Pollard. So, yes, they're good. Chicago has also added all those faces. Giannis is back. Paul Arders is back, and then they've added and Nate Goff is back, and then they added some pieces as well with the Belgians that are big names that we're going to be talking about and be learning throughout this season, who maybe not known to the UFA crowd, but anybody who watches any international ultimate, they know these names. They know these young Belgian players are just phenomenal talents in Europe. And even Toronto has recharged, but they're not. Sorry.
No, yeah. I only asked about the East too. You went deep.
Well,
You went everywhere.
I'm saying because the Glory, I think they're the
Yeah.
favorite in the East because I think they're the favorite in the league. And then I think the Empire and DC are going to be fighting for third. But those two, I think, really have to watch their heels because of what Toronto has done to recoup their team this year. I think David Brandoff in year one, again, you and I, we love Brando, but I do think having seen their roster, it's going to be a bit rebuildy. And with a new coach now this season, I think they can actually finally own up to the rebuilding aspect of it. You do have some of the regular faces. Mott is back, and Martin and Nardelli, Whitmer. So yes, there are familiar faces, but they also are getting younger in important ways. And speaking of the college players, I mean, maybe 2 of their top 7 players in the Grossberg brothers at Georgia Tech, they're going to be arriving midseason. So Philly, and I also mentioned their schedule actually hurts them quite a bit because their schedule is kind of top heavy. They have to get done. They have to face Toronto twice and Montreal in the beginning of the season. And if Philly is going to make the postseason, they basically have to go 3-0 there. So I think for Philly, they've got we'll say their must-win games actually come rather early in the season, and that might go against Philly a little bit. And then Montreal, it's tough. Losing your best player, it's tough. And they did return as much as they could. But yeah, so the way I see it shaking out in the East is I do think that I do think Boston right now, they are in the driver's seat for first, but DC is going to be interesting as well because they did lose Johnny Malks, but they return Christian Boxley and they return some other pieces, but they also lost Troy Holland. So for every name that I said they lost, they also returned somebody. So I don't know. They're not the same talent that they were 2 years ago, though. So it is interesting to see DC and New York both for me. If some things work out for them, it's going to be great. And they could definitely contend with Boston at the top of the division because we know what we're going to get from Boston. But I think with the Empire and DC, there's a lot of questions. And, those games especially, revolving door. Who knows how those are going to shake out?
Yeah. Johnny Malks was always just like sneaky good. Like just something about the consistency and when he moved, where he moved, what he did. Like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes when you would watch, if you didn't really know what you were looking for, you would think like, oh, he's fine. This is a good player, whatever. But when you like really watched and what he did for that team, like really, really, really good. So that's a big loss. And, you're getting Boxley back, also amazing player, but just such a different position. And, the way DC moved the disc and like their brand of small ball that wasn't always super small, but just like the way they went about it and the way the whole team kind of operated that way. I feel like Malks was like a really, really big part of that, and it'll be hurt more than the replacements can kind of fix or fill
they also
in.
lost Elliot Bonet as well, who was kind of their star receiver, taking the place of Boxley last year. So Boxley, if anything, is kind of replacing the role that Elliot Bonet had, but Boxley can kind of rotate around the disc. I mean, he really is. Boxley is the most dangerous player in the entire league in a 4x4 box. It really is. Like, I know that I'm saying the name Boxley, but like, there's nobody more dangerous than a 4v4 box. You could give me an argument for John Randolph. I mean, again, he's an Empire player.
What about Jeffrey? Jeffrey's just so big; he would take up the whole box.
Okay. Jeff Babbitt Jeff Babbitt gets open the most of any player in the league in a 20-yard box, in a 10-yard box, in a 50-yard box. There's a reason he's a 2-time MVP. That's different. I'm talking about just the small skill set of a 4x4 box. All
right, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just playing. Yeah.
Maybe Jeff had a little bit of trouble with his shoulders, like navigating a 4v4 box. I don't know, or 3v3 box. Just make the box small enough that Jeff can't get around in it, and that's the box that I'm talking about.
Okay.
But I think we've definitely talked enough. I'll say that. Yeah, I think that if anything, though, the target, it's interesting. They've never made championship weekend, but very much like DC was 2 years ago, it feels like the target is on the back of a team that never made championship weekend, and I think that's an interesting wrinkle to this league and how we get it all started. I know that we're trying to pump up that it is Minnesota because they are defending champs. I get that. But yeah, I mean, I just think there's a different level right now that we're going to see from Boston in the league. So yeah. And I think that means for the Empire, which again, they're the 3-time champs. They still return Jack Williams. They still return Ben Yott. They still have John Randolph. They have Antoine Davis. They have Calvin Brown. They have Marquez Brownlee. They have Max Shepard. They have Everett Shapiro. I mean, the Empire, I'm going to say all the names I just said, those are stars in this league. And if they can make 2 or 3 more stars in this league, hey, then we're talking about the Empire still going 11, 12 deep when we're talking about star level talent. And you throw that 12 against any team in the league, including Boston. And the Empire, as you know, like they're a team that does know how to win a championship. There's a reason why the Stevens family continues to allow the Empire podcast to exist. Because I'll tell you, if this was not a team that was pushing for a postseason or pushing for a 4th championship, I don't know if you and I would be talking every week. But but I mean, that's the intent of the Empire organization, is to win championships, and that should not be forgotten.
Yeah, no, and even if maybe I think Boston has a slight edge just like going into the season, I think chemistry plays a large part of that, and they're kind of building with some momentum and just adding, a piece or two here and there, which kind of complement everything they have going on. Whereas Empire is like, it's not a rebuild in the sense that most sports teams would use a rebuild, where you're kind of like things have been blown up and you're not good. I mean, like you said, you just listed a long list of very, very good players. So it's just kind of, as I said, putting all the pieces together and seeing how it goes. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Empire made championship weekend again. It's just, I'm excited for the journey to see if they can put it all together.
Yeah, I mean, there's an added wrinkle that I know Anthony Nunez has not watched that Boston game. He can text me and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that he does not watch those things. So he has not watched that buzzer beater yet. He's not going to do that. But I can tell you that
broke my heart.
Yeah, but I can tell you in their minds, I think it feels good that the Empire want to be the hunters this year instead of the hunted. So I guess the last shout out we have is shout out Brian Jones, head coach of the Buffalo Hunters way back in the day. Do your history, do your homework, kids at home. But more importantly, get your tickets, go to the Empire shop, and make sure you get your tickets for the season, get your merch, get all that stuff, and it'll be a good time. So yeah. All right, Matt, I feel like we had some rust. It took us a little long here to have some rust to shake off, but I feel like we're in good shape. I love the energy on the timeout poll rule. So
yeah, I feel like I lost the narrative. I just couldn't. I hate it. I hate it. If that's the only takeaway that anyone has from this podcast, it's that rule is awful and it should not move forward ever again.
Okay, well, I think the season will give us plenty better things to talk about than a rule that is not going to affect.
Yeah.
All right. So from Pippin, Auletta, this is Dan Hilton for the entire Empire family. We'll see you next time.